Hey everyone! Today we're diving into a moment in American history that, well, most people have never even heard of. But it was a battle so devastating it delivered a blow that nearly shattered the young United States right at the very beginning. All right, let me ask you something. When you think about the U.S. Army's single worst defeat ever, what pops into your head? You're probably thinking of something like Pearl Harbor, right? Or maybe the Battle of the Bulge. Even some huge bloody battle from the Civil War. Well, what if I told you it was none of those? The answer is probably going to surprise you. The most devastating defeat, when you look at the percentage of an army just completely wiped out, happened way before any of those famous wars. It was delivered by an incredible Miami war chief, a guy named Little Turtle, and his confederacy of, frankly, professional warriors. So, to really get how this all went down, here's what we're going to cover. First, what was this battle? Then we'll look at the armies, total opposites. We'll get into Little Turtle's brilliant plan, see the total collapse on the Wabash River, and then ask why this whole thing is basically forgotten today. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, America's worst defeat. We need to set the scene here and really grasp the scale of what happened at the Battle of the Wabash. Yeah, this was not just some small skirmish out on the frontier. The Battle of the Wabash, which, by the way, is also called St. Clair's defeat because of how badly it went for the Americans, was a complete and utter catastrophe. We're talking about the single biggest victory any Native American force ever won against the U.S. military. Period. So you gotta be asking, how is a defeat this total even possible? Well, to get that, you have to look at who was actually fighting. This is a story of two armies that could not have been more different, right down to their commanders. Okay, so in one corner, you've got Little Turtle. He's the war chief of the Miami people, and everyone knew he was a master strategist, just brilliant. And in the other corner, Arthur St. Clair. Now, he was a veteran of the Revolutionary War, sure, but he was in charge of this brand new American army that was, to put it mildly, a total mess. And this right here, this quote, gets to the absolute heart of the problem for the U.S. side. St. Clair's army, it wasn't made up of tough, seasoned soldiers. No. As one person at the time put it, they were just men collected from the streets and prisons. I mean, wow. Imagine trying to build an army out of that. You just can't imagine a bigger contrast. On one side, the Native American Confederacy. These are professional warriors. They're fighting to protect their homes. They know the land like the back of their hand. They're a tight-knit, motivated force with incredible leadership. And St. Clair's army? The exact opposite in every way. No discipline, totally unprepared for the wilderness, morale was in the gutter, and the command structure was a disaster from day one. So with a setup like that, the stage was perfectly set for Little Turtle to pull off something incredible. We're talking a tactical masterstroke. His plan wasn't just to win a battle. It was to achieve total, complete annihilation of the enemy force. And he was going to do it with a brilliant classic tactic. The key to the whole thing was something called the crescent formation. It's a classic military move, and it is brutally effective. Think about it. You line up your fighters in a curve, like a crescent moon. You hit the enemy head-on. And at the same time, the two ends of the crescent swing around the sides and trap them. Simple, right? But absolutely deadly. And the way they pulled it off, it was perfect. It starts with a surprise attack, right at dawn. The U.S. camp is totally asleep, completely unprepared. As the American soldiers are stumbling around in chaos, the two horns of that crescent formation just sweep in, wrapping around them like a giant fist closing. Before the U.S. commanders could even figure out what was going on, it was too late. The trap was sprung. They were surrounded. And what happened next? You can't even really call it a battle. It was a rout, a total collapse, and it was fast, it was brutal, and it was absolute. Just look at this number for a second. 97%. Out of about 1,000 U.S. officers and soldiers under St. Clair, 97% of them were either killed or wounded. I mean, just let that sink in. That's not a defeat. That's an annihilation. An entire American army was just gone. And the speed of it all is just mind-blowing. The attack kicks off at 6:30 in the morning. By 8 a.m., the American lines are already starting to crumble. An hour and a half later, at 9:30, the encirclement is complete, and there's no leadership left. It's just chaos. By 10 a.m., it's all over. A full, desperate, every-man-for-himself retreat. In about 3 hours, an army ceased to exist. So that brings up a huge question, right? How does a disaster of this size just get forgotten? That brings us to our final section, the battle's legacy and why it's so important that we actually talk about it.
So what are the big takeaways here? Let's boil it down. First, this was, proportionally, the single worst defeat the U.S. Army has ever suffered. Ever. Second, it was an absolute masterclass in strategy from Little Turtle. Just brilliant. It also showed in the harshest way possible the difference between a professional fighting force and a bunch of unprepared recruits. And for the U.S. as a new country, the shock and the humiliation were just profound.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. This defeat was, percentage-wise, worse than Custer's last stand, worse than any single day in the World Wars. So why don't we ever hear about it? Why is one of the most significant battles in early American history basically a historical footnote? It really makes you wonder what other stories get left out of the history books, doesn't it?